In the ruins of empires and the silence of sealed archives, pieces of the Second World War remain buried. Documents stamped vertraulich, testimonies redacted in black ink, operations never officially conducted. Beneath the surface of victory and reconstruction lies another map of history, drawn in the language of omission. From the frozen edges of Svalbard to the jungles of Patagonia, from vanished U-boats to erased scientists, each thread leads deeper into a machinery of secrecy that did not end in 1945. It only changed its uniform. What survives are fragments, coded directives, intercepted transmissions, and witnesses who do not wish to be found. Chapter 1. The Ghost Convoy of Operation Solstice. In February 1945, as the Eastern Front collapsed under the relentless advance of the Red Army, remnants of the German 11th SS Panzer Army regrouped along the Pomeranian corridor. Operation Solstice, officially recorded as a last-ditch counter-offensive, was launched to relieve encircled forces near Stargard. But among the classified entries of the Wehrmacht's own Kriegsarchive, a second layer of documentation reveals something far less conventional. Buried in the logistics orders dated 14th February, signed by General Heinz Lammerding, was an unlisted convoy designated Transport Gruppe E-77. Its manifest omitted standard ammunition and fuel allocations, replaced instead with references to Material S and Wissenschaftliche Vorräte, scientific supplies. The convoy departed Stargard at dawn under SS escort and was never seen again. The only surviving reference to E-77 came from an intercepted Soviet field report written 2 days later by Major Ivan Korolenko of the 1st Belarusian Front. His men had discovered Tyre, impressions leading into the dense Białogard forest, ending abruptly at what appeared to be a collapsed tunnel entrance. Korolenko's note described a faint odor of diesel and metallic residue of unknown composition. Within 24 hours, his patrol was recalled, and the site was bombed by artillery under Soviet command. No further mention of the convoy exists in official records. After the war, the Allies classified the entire operation under British Control Commission file CW-1256. When declassified in 1978, researchers discovered several inconsistencies. The convoy's listed commander, Hauptsturmführer Otto Kessler, was never registered among German military personnel, and his supposed hometown in Saxony had been erased from post-war census rolls. An attached photograph, grainy, partially burned, depicted 6 trucks bearing markings of the 5th SS Panzer Division Wiking, though no such vehicles were reported missing in the area. The only clue, scribbled on the back in faded pencil, read, Berggraben 17-2 Nordlager. Local accounts collected by Polish civilians after the war added to the mystery. Residents of Schwidwin recalled hearing heavy engines passing through at night, followed by gunfire near the forest's edge. Some spoke of men in grey uniforms unloading long metal crates under dim lanterns. In 1951, Polish forestry workers clearing the Białogard sector unearthed rusted fragments of what appeared to be reinforced steel casing, embedded with German serial plates marked RLM Testreihe 09. Experts later confirmed that the plates were issued by the Reichsluftfahrtministerium, the Air Ministry reserved for experimental aviation components. In the 1960s, Cold War intelligence agencies began revisiting abandoned wartime mysteries. Among the projects revived was the search for missing Axis scientific archives. A 1965 memorandum from the CIA's Technical Intelligence Division, declassified in 2003, mentions anomalous readings in northern Pomerania, possible subsurface structures consistent with wartime bunkers. The document cross-referenced Soviet reconnaissance data from 1957, showing localized magnetic distortion in the same region. Field surveys were ordered, but the results were sealed under Project Remus, a compartmentalized NATO operation focusing on advanced materials of non-Soviet origin. By the late 1980s, when Polish archaeologists sought to explore the area, they were denied access by government order, citing unexploded ordnance. Unofficially, former intelligence officers have since claimed that NATO teams removed several containers during a secret recovery effort in 1969, their contents flown out through Ramstein Air Base. A retired German archivist, Dr. Lutz Mertens, who handled remnants of Solstice documents at the Bundesarchiv, described the papers as sanitized, all personnel names replaced with initials, technical drawings reclassified under Allied patents. He vanished in 1992 after receiving anonymous correspondence postmarked from Zurich containing a single line. E-77 arrived safely, Satellite imagery in the early 2000s revealed subtle ground depressions and rectilinear anomalies beneath the northern WWII woods, resembling reinforced concrete vaults. Though weathered, the outlines aligned perfectly with wartime aerial photos taken by the Luftwaffe in 1944, suggesting an existing subterranean complex. Requests by historians to investigate were repeatedly declined by the Polish Ministry of Defense, citing environmental protection zones. Despite the official stance, hikers in 2011 reported stumbling upon a collapsed shaft, its inner walls coated with vitrified residue as if exposed to extreme heat. Within the debris lay remnants of mechanical wiring. Unlike any known German model from the 1940s, the prevailing theory among independent researchers proposes that Operation Solstice concealed the relocation of advanced propulsion research from the Heinkel facilities at Oranienburg, including experimental turbine assemblies linked to the elusive Project Schwalbe. However, others suggest a different purpose altogether: a mobile archive safeguarding intelligence on chemical and biological experiments conducted in Eastern Europe. The SS had a pattern of dispersing sensitive assets under the guise of routine troop movements, ensuring no single site would contain incriminating evidence of war crimes or technological projects the Allies might seize. One peculiar artifact connected to the mystery surfaced in 1987 at an estate auction in Hamburg: a brass identification tag marked E77, Sturmbannführer Kessler, WWII. The buyer, a collector of wartime relics, claimed it was accompanied by a weathered map fragment showing a shaded zone labelled Nordlager. He turned it over to German authorities, but the item disappeared during transfer to the Federal Criminal Police Office. Subsequent inquiries revealed no record of its receipt. Today, the fate of Transport Group E77 remains unverified. No remains, no vehicles, no official closure. The Red Army's destruction of the surrounding area erased potential evidence, while Allied records buried the rest beneath decades of bureaucratic silence. The few surviving documents, intercepted telegrams, partial manifests, and coded communiques, paint the picture of an operation that existed only on the margins of history, never meant to be found. Whether it carried scientific material, incriminating archives, or something more enigmatic, the truth of Solstice is locked beneath soil that still yields metallic whispers when probed by magnetometer. 70 years later, in the archives of both Moscow and London, identical gaps appear in the record, blank spaces where page numbers skip and references dissolve. It is as though the convoy itself, and everything it carried, was systematically erased from the collective ledger of war, but silence leaves its own kind of evidence, and somewhere in the forests of Pomerania, the road to the past still ends abruptly, buried under ash, mud, and secrecy. Chapter 2: The Vienna Cipher and the Silent Directive. On April 14, 1945, as Soviet troops closed on Vienna from the east, a detachment of American counterintelligence officers under OSS Directive R-14 entered the city through the southern district of Favoriten. Their objective was to secure documentation from the former Reichssicherheitshauptamt RSHA satellite office that had operated covertly under the name Zentralstelle 12B. What they found amid the smouldering ruins was a basement filled with the charred remains of thousands of Gestapo files, still smouldering in metal cabinets. Yet in a small locked safe left inexplicably intact lay a folder stamped Geheimdirektiv Nullpunkt. It would become known among intelligence circles as the Vienna Cipher. The folder contained 8 half-burned correspondence sheets, typed on military-issue paper with the SS insignia embossed in the corner. Each carried fragments of coded language, strings of numbers, initials, and operational terms. The most legible phrase read, Übertragungen an Nordgruppe fortsetzen bis Übergangspunkt Sigma. Roughly translated, it meant continue transmissions to Nord Group until transition point Sigma. The cipher's peculiar phrasing suggested coordination between the SS Scientific Research Department, Forschungsstelle, EEW, and an unknown external unit, possibly operating outside the Reich. Alongside these, a telegram dated March 17, 1945, bore the phrase, Directive Nullpunkt confirmed by Führungsstab, termination after evacuation complete. No further context was provided. For years, the cipher remained unsolved. The OSS transferred the documents to the British Special Intelligence Bureau in London, where cryptanalyst Dr. Henry Avery catalogued them in 1947 under file BSI ARS 773. Avery's notes indicated the cipher bore similarities to an obsolete Abwehr encryption system known as Rotman 42s, but it incorporated anomalous references to sigma lines and Nord coordinates. Between 1948 and 1951, several attempts to break the code failed. Then, in 1979, linguist and historian Dr. Elaine Thorne from Oxford University requested access to the documents for a private research paper on post-war SS networks. Within months, she had succeeded in decoding a partial segment, revealing locations in Tyrol, Bolzano, and Lake Garda, all historically tied to post-war escape routes, later connected to the organization known as Odessa. Dr. Thorne's breakthrough caused immediate attention within MI6. The decoded segments referenced shipments, described as biologische Unterlagen, biological records, and technische Vorräte, technical reserves, accompanied by initials matching former SS scientists later identified in Allied intelligence operations. One of these initials corresponded to Dr. Victor Schaefer, an aeronautics engineer who vanished in April 1945, later rumored to have resurfaced in Argentina under a false identity. Days after her findings were submitted, Thorne's notes were confiscated under the Official Secrets Act. On December 22, 1979, she was killed in a car accident outside Oxford, her vehicle reportedly struck by a truck that left no traceable registration. The surviving cipher documents were reclassified under National Security Exemption 58A. In 1983, declassified fragments of the OSS archives briefly referenced Directive Nullpunkt during a BBC documentary titled The Vienna Files. Within days of airing, the BBC retracted the episode, citing errors in verification. However, transcripts preserved by journalists revealed statements from an unnamed former MI6 officer who claimed that Directive Nullpunkt was not a wartime order but a contingency plan for post-surrender operations. According to the source, the Nord Group referred to a covert network of SS and industrial contacts within Scandinavia, established to preserve critical research and personnel before Germany's collapse. The transition point sigma may have been the code for the moment of formal surrender, signaling activation of hidden relocation channels. A secondary trail of evidence emerged in Austria's National Archives in 1991, when historian Friedrich Hauser uncovered a mislabeled crate marked Reichspost 1946. Inside were telegraph tapes encoded with a nearly identical cipher structure to Nullpunkt, dated from 1947, 2 years after Germany's surrender. This revelation implied the network had continued communication under Allied occupation. Hauser was subsequently detained by Austrian intelligence for unlawful possession of restricted material. When released weeks later, he refused all interviews. He left Vienna the following year and was never publicly seen. Again, cross-analysis between Thorne's partial decryption and Hauser's post-war tapes led researchers to conclude that Nord Group might have evolved into a clandestine technology transfer cell integrated into early NATO intelligence. Supporting this theory, a document released accidentally through a Freedom of Information request in 2009 referenced Directive Nullpunkt personnel reassigned under operation name Station Green, 1950. Station Green remains classified under NATO archives to this day, but historians link it to early Cold War technical collaborations involving captured German scientists, some of whom had prior affiliations with the SS. Curiously, the CIA's own internal registry contains no entry under that name, yet a stray memorandum from 1951, signed by Alan Dulles, includes the line, Nullpunkt files secured, Vienna assets neutralized, proceed with integration under new designation. The ambiguity of the phrasing has led some to interpret integration as the formal absorption of former SS technical experts into Western intelligence projects. Others believe it refers to something more covert, a transfer of archival material too sensitive for public record. Eyewitness testimony from an Austrian telegraph operator, Elsa König, recorded in 1968, adds an unsettling dimension. She recalled transmitting coded messages from a temporary post office set up in the ruins of Vienna's 3rd district in late 1945. The messages bore signatures identical to those found in the Nullpunkt documents, and her supervisor reportedly told her they were for the Americans. She never learned their contents, but she remembered one instruction vividly. When sigma ends, The new order begins. The Vienna cipher thus remains one of the most elusive legacies of the war's aftermath, a blend of code, silence, and coincidence. Its existence ties together fragments of history that official channels have spent decades denying. The possibility that the war's intelligence networks did not vanish, but instead shifted allegiance, carrying with them the ghosts of the Reich's most secret research. Today, the folder rests in a temperature-controlled vault at Hanslope Park, its access restricted to Level 5 clearance. The burn marks on the paper edges still bear the smell of smoke and chemicals, a reminder that what little survives of Directive Nullpunkt may be only the surface of a deeper, hidden structure that continues to move unseen beneath the archives of post-war Europe. Chapter 3. Cold Ashes of the Polar Station. In February 1952, a Norwegian fishing vessel named Vega Nord reported an unusual discovery off the coast of Svalbard. Several corroded metal drums and twisted steel fragments washed ashore on the northwestern ice shelf. The items bore faint stenciling in German. Wehrmachtseigentum. Initially dismissed as remnants from a lost transport vessel, the debris attracted attention when one of the drums, upon being pried open, revealed precision instruments wrapped in oilcloth and bearing the emblem of the Reich Research Council. The Norwegian authorities notified Oslo, which in turn contacted Allied naval intelligence. Within days, a small detachment from the US Office of Naval Research arrived quietly in Longyearbyen to investigate. They carried documents marked Polar Station 9. According to declassified OSS records, Polar Station 9 had been established in 1944 under the guise of a meteorological post. Its real purpose, however, was far from weather observation. Embedded within Wehrmacht Arctic Command files, researchers later found cryptic references to Versuchsreihe Polarlicht, Experiment Series Aurora. The operation appeared to involve high-frequency transmissions and atmospheric ionization research, conducted in collaboration with Luftwaffe Signalabteilung 53. The facility's location, approximately 300 kilometers north of Svalbard's main settlement, was intended to keep it beyond Allied detection. Its supply line depended on U-boats running from Tromsø and Narvik, using remote fjords as refueling points. In August 1944, U-354 was dispatched to retrieve personnel and sensitive cargo from the station, following increased Allied air patrols. The submarine never returned. German naval logs list U-354 as missing, presumed sunk, yet Soviet post-war files obtained in 1994 describe a U-boat wreck discovered near Franz Josef Land, showing signs of internal explosion, as though detonated from within. No remains were found. The implication that the crew scuttled the vessel rather than risk capture only deepened the enigma surrounding the Polar Station's activities when Allied forces reviewed captured German communication archives in 1945. All references to the Svalbard facility had been erased. What few remained mentioned aurora fields and plasma tests, terms without context in standard military lexicon. British scientists attached to Operation Tabarin, a polar research initiative, were later briefed on possible enemy installations in northern latitudes, but were instructed to classify any findings as meteorological anomalies. Between 1947 and 1951, at least 3 joint US-Norwegian reconnaissance flights over the Svalbard region reported infrared irregularities on the ice sheet, readings consistent with residual heat beneath several meters of snow. Each time, the data was suppressed by NATO's Arctic Command. In the summer of 1963, a covert recovery mission codenamed Operation Cold Ash was launched under Norwegian authority, but funded and directed by the US Air Force. Its stated objective was the recovery of lost wartime assets, but eyewitnesses suggest otherwise. Among the 12 men deployed, 2 were civilian engineers specializing in cryogenic containment and radioisotopes. After only 48 hours, the mission was abruptly terminated. The official report cited severe weather and logistical failure, but classified minutes from a post-mission debrief describe strong electromagnetic interference and surface instability at the landing site. All photographic evidence taken during the operation was destroyed, and the participants signed lifelong non-disclosure agreements. One of them, Lieutenant Erik Johansson, later told a journalist in 1988 that what they found was not a base, it was a tomb built into the ice. A Soviet satellite scan from 1972 recorded an irregular geometric formation. beneath the ice approximately 50 meters deep, matching the location of the alleged station. The pattern suggested reinforced concrete structures extending in parallel corridors. Subsequent scans in the 1980s showed a gradual shift in the ice layers, as if something beneath was collapsing inward. When independent researchers attempted to obtain high-resolution images, the coordinates were redacted in all public datasets. Even today, Svalbard's official maps list the area as a restricted environmental zone with no access permits granted. The most significant evidence linking Polar Station 9 to wartime experiments surfaced in 1998, when a private diver off Norway's northern coast recovered a waterlogged crate containing instrument parts and a faded manual stamped Geheime Kommandosache, Aurora 3. The manual's contents were partially legible, referencing ion beam discharges and Störfrequenzbeobachtung, disturbance frequency monitoring. Marginal notes indicated cooperation with Heeresversuchsanstalt Peenemünde, the Army Research Center responsible for Germany's rocketry program. Experts who reviewed the document proposed that the station may have been conducting early research into atmospheric wave propagation, possibly for long-range communication or radar disruption. The presence of shielding materials resembling beryllium alloy suggests they were testing something capable of generating high radiation output. By the early 2000s, all attempts to locate the site were blocked by Norwegian defense authorities, citing safety hazards and environmental contamination risk. Yet in 2007, seismic monitors recorded a localized tremor in the region's uninhabited north sector, consistent with a structural collapse beneath ice. Soon after, US and Norwegian military vessels were observed operating in the vicinity, their transponders disabled. No official statement followed. Among the few remaining witnesses was a retired Norwegian radio operator, Niels Ervik, who claimed to have intercepted a faint transmission in Morse code from the polar zone on February 19, 1945. The same date, U-354 disappeared. The message, partially decoded, read, "Aurora complete. Commence burial. No further contact." When questioned decades later, Ervik admitted he could never forget the final call sign that followed. P9 Ende. The term burial has since sparked debate among historians. Some interpret it literally, the deliberate destruction or entombment of experimental materials to prevent discovery. Others believe burial referred to self-destruction protocols tied to advanced technology, consistent with similar directives issued by the SS Scientific Command in early 1945. Whatever the truth, the absence of any surviving personnel list or equipment inventory ensures the details remain speculative. A declassified 1956 CIA internal note, retrieved under FOIA request, perhaps best captures the unease surrounding the subject. It reads, "Polar Station 9 assets likely unrecoverable. Environmental factors have rendered site inert. Recommend continued denial of existence. Scientific yield undetermined. Potential implications remain classified." No further correspondence appears in the archives. The note was signed simply RD Arctic Section. Today, the story of Polar Station 9 lingers on the periphery of documented history, an operation that officially never existed, in a place that officially cannot be visited. But in the fading light of the Arctic summer, the sea ice still groans where the currents meet the cold shelf, and fishermen still speak of strange metal fragments surfacing after each thaw. They say that when the wind is right, you can hear the faint hum of something deep beneath the ice, steady, mechanical, and older than their father's war. The echoes of what was once buried continue to rise, carried by the cold ashes of the polar station. Chapter 4. The Odessa Intercept Transmission. In April 1947, a small Royal Air Force monitoring outpost on the southern coast of Cyprus, designated Station T-13, detected a sequence of encrypted radio transmissions emanating from the South Atlantic sector. The messages were short, precise, and transmitted at irregular intervals between 02 and 04 UGMT. What drew attention was their signature frequency, 8.125 MHz, a band previously used by the German Kriegsmarine for long-range communications. Station T-13 logged each burst, cataloguing the traffic under the codename Odessa Intercept. Within a week, analysts at the British Government Communications Headquarters, GCHQ, determined that the signals were bouncing off the ionosphere from a terrestrial source, specifically Buenos Aires, Argentina. Each transmission ended with the same phrase in German Morse, "Für die Zukunft," for the future. At first, the intercepts were suspected to be remnants of civilian transmissions from post-war expatriates, but when a frequency correlation was conducted, the encryption pattern matched an obsolete SS cipher key known as Enigma M4 Nordsee variant, believed destroyed at the war's end. The cipher key had last been used by elements of the Abwehr's Foreign Intelligence Section, AMT-6, during 1944. Its reappearance 2 years later, from a continent away, triggered immediate concern within Allied intelligence networks that remnants of Nazi command structures might still be coordinating abroad. Decrypted portions of the transmissions referenced Material K and Abteilung 512, along with coordinates pointing to the Patagonian steppes south of Bariloche, a region already rumored to harbor escaped German officers. Internal GCHQ memos forwarded to Washington in May 1947 confirmed that one message contained references to transport completed, cargo secured. The British files were reclassified upon arrival at the US Embassy, then transferred under Project Paperclip jurisdiction, ensuring that civilian and press access would remain impossible. The American response was swift and clandestine. A naval intelligence detachment under Commander Robert H. Daniels was dispatched from Panama aboard the USS Norton Sound, officially tasked with meteorological calibration. The ship, however, carried a full cryptographic division and an aircraft reconnaissance detachment. Their mission logs, later partially declassified, confirmed that aerial photographs were taken along Argentina's southern coastline in June 1947, focusing on a barren stretch of land known locally as La Pampa del Silencio. Within months, all documentation of the mission disappeared from Navy archives. Daniels retired 2 years later, leaving behind no interviews or public statements. In 1950, a cryptologist within the newly formed NSA, Walter Keane, revisited the Odessa intercepts as part of an internal review of residual axis communications. His analysis revealed that the cipher's numerical intervals corresponded to serial numbers used by Reichsbank transfer codes, implying that the transmissions were coordinating financial movements rather than troop logistics. One decrypted string translated to account delta reactivated, Zurich confirmed, suggesting that a post-war financial infrastructure remained operational under the Odessa framework, facilitating the relocation of assets and personnel. Keane's memorandum was suppressed by higher command. His notes were discovered decades later, heavily redacted, stored in an unlabeled folder simply titled Phase Continuation. Meanwhile, the CIA's Buenos Aires station began collecting human intelligence on expatriate German circles suspected of harboring former SS members. Among the names flagged was Dr. Emil von Hartmann, a wartime logistics officer attached to the Waffen-SS Economic Office, reported deceased in 1945. Yet in 1948, Argentine police records list a Dr. Enrique Hartmann, resident of Cordoba, operating a small import company. His business transactions aligned precisely with bank transfers noted in the intercepts. He was found dead in July 1947, 3 days after the final Odessa transmission was recorded by station T13. Official cause of death: heart failure. No autopsy was performed. In later years, fragments of the same transmission logs surfaced in NATO's cryptologic archives under the project name Section 4, a classified compartment tasked with monitoring residual enemy communication patterns. Cross-referencing data revealed at least 6 transmissions between April and July 1947, all originating from South America. Each broadcast appeared to coincide with the confirmed arrival of German scientists in the United States under Operation Paperclip, suggesting coordination between escape networks and Allied extraction programs. This overlap has fueled decades of speculation that portions of the Odessa organization were quietly absorbed into Western intelligence frameworks, preserving the knowledge base of the defeated. Reich under a new flag. In 1982, Argentine journalist Miguel Alvarez obtained a partial transcript of one intercept from a retired British signals officer. The decrypted message read, "Phase Sigma achieved. Await instruction for transfer to Meridian." The reference to Meridian caught historians' attention, as it corresponded with later NATO code designations associated with Project Black Meridian, an American initiative to catalogue captured German propulsion research. The implication that Odessa transmissions referenced or perhaps intersected with that project remains circumstantial, but the coincidence is too precise to dismiss. Attempts to locate the original broadcast source in Buenos Aires led investigators to an abandoned villa in the Palermo district, owned by an expatriate shipping magnate named Karl Drexler. Inside, police discovered a hidden room containing outdated radio equipment and remnants of Enigma machine components. Local authorities dismissed the find as historical debris. However, when an American technical advisor visited the site weeks later, all materials were reportedly removed under diplomatic escort. The equipment was never seen. Again, documents obtained through British declassification requests in 2011 confirm that the final Odessa intercept occurred on July 23, 1947. The message was brief. Mission complete. Return silent. The future secured. After that date, the frequency fell silent permanently. 2 months later, Station T13 was disbanded and its personnel reassigned without explanation. The original intercept logs were archived at Cheltenham under top-secret clearance and later transferred to the US National Archives in 1958. When researchers sought access in 2004, the boxes were found empty, contents misplaced during recataloguing. Today, the Odessa intercept stands as one of the most confounding Cold War enigmas. It exists at the intersection of myth and bureaucratic evidence. Radio signals from an empire that refused to die, encoded in the same language that once carried orders of genocide. Whether the transmissions were the dying echoes of a collapsing network or the first whispers of a new order remains unresolved. What is certain is that someone, somewhere, intended for those messages to be heard and then forgotten. And within that silence, buried beneath classified designations and missing files, the phrase "für die Zukunft" still resonates. An epitaph for a network that never truly surrendered. Chapter 5. Project Black Meridian and the Vanishing Files. On May 3, 1945, as Allied forces swept through the outskirts of Munich, a small detachment of the US Third Army's Technical Intelligence Unit entered an unmarked warehouse near Allach. Inside, they discovered stacks of SS research documents, sealed crates of machinery, and several disassembled prototypes bearing the insignia of the Reichsluftfahrtministerium, Germany's Air Ministry. Many of the papers were stamped Hochgeheim BM. According to the field inventory filed 2 days later, BM denoted Black Meridian, an internal SS code for Schwarzer Meridian, a term never officially documented elsewhere. The papers were catalogued, boxed, and transferred to the Allied Combined Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee under Operation Dustbin. Their trail vanishes immediately afterward. The documents resurfaced briefly in 1947, when US Army Air Forces engineers at Wright Field, Ohio, began referencing unidentified German schematics in internal memos. The drawings describe propulsion systems that use magnetic field manipulation rather than combustion. The engineering language was consistent with work from Peenemunde's advanced aerodynamics group, but included annotations by an unknown author marked Dr. V. Schaefer, a name that had already appeared in the decoded Vienna cipher under Directive Nullpunkt. Cross-referencing confirmed no such scientist had been recorded among captured personnel. When the Air Force's Project Sign began in 1948 to study unidentified aerial phenomena, its early reports repeatedly referenced Black Meridian experimental sources, though this terminology vanished from official documentation after 1949 declassified. Memos reveal that in September 1950, the US Air Materiel Command transferred certain recovered technologies to a private contractor, Consolidated Electrodynamics Corporation of Pasadena, under sealed authorization. The transfer file, numbered AMX42 Black, lists the shipment contents as metallic samples, unclassified but restricted by order of Executive Section. No subsequent documentation confirms receipt. The CIA's internal catalog for that year contains one reference to the project: materials reassigned to Majestic Technical Division. The existence of such a division has never been publicly confirmed, though its codename recurs in several Cold War-era archives concerning recovered Axis research. When the US Freedom of Information Act went into effect decades later, all related requests were denied on national security grounds. Testimony from individuals linked to Wright Field during the early 1950s paints a haunting picture of what Black Meridian may have entailed. Retired engineer William P. Hanley, interviewed in 1974, recalled seeing disc-shaped metallic structures inside Hangar 18 that did not correspond to any known aerodynamic frame. Hanley claimed the objects were accompanied by German language documents, labeled "Nicht öffnen ohne Autorisierung", Meridian, His superior ordered the area sealed and reclassified. Within weeks, Hanley was transferred to another division. Shortly thereafter, his personnel file was purged from Air Force records. His account was dismissed as unreliable until a 1989 WWII release revealed that Meridian was indeed used as a classification marker for foreign technology analysis between 1946 and 1952. The pattern of silence extended beyond the United States. In 1953, a British liaison officer attached to NATO's technical intelligence branch filed a brief noting that Operation Black Meridian materials were to be relocated from German depots to Allied custody for consolidation under paperclip extension. British retained copies of 2 documents describing rotational plasma chambers and electrogravitic vector control. Scientists at Farnborough reportedly attempted replication, but the results were inconclusive. After 1956, no further mentions appear in British archives. In 1961, NATO's internal registry listed the entire Black Meridian file series as terminated and expunged. Decades later, fragments began to resurface. In 1987, a journalist named Robert Fulham obtained what he claimed was a recovered excerpt of a 1945 memorandum from Major Clarence McNeil of the U.S. Technical Intelligence Division. It described energy displacement effects produced by a self-contained electromagnetic rotation unit tested by German personnel at an underground site near Thuringia. The report mentioned fatal radiation, exposure to test engineers. The memo's authenticity has never been verified, but its technical phrasing matched the few surviving references to Project Kronos, a rumored SS experiment on temporal energy fields. Whether Kronos and Black Meridian were one and the same remains speculation, but both vanished from record around 1945. By the 1990s, researchers began connecting Black Meridian to a cluster of missing Allied research papers, once stored at the National Archives in Suitland, Maryland. In 1993, archivists discovered that 15 boxes catalogued under captured German scientific materials, physics, had disappeared. The disappearance coincided with a classified Department of Defense audit concerning Cold War-era research contracts. Internal correspondence refers obliquely to legacy projects requiring indefinite retention outside federal registry. A handwritten note in the audit margins simply reads, "BM Group transferred 1952, still black." The most credible surviving testimony regarding Black Meridian came from Dr. Harold D. Cantor, a propulsion scientist who served under the Rand Corporation in the early 1950s. In a 1985 recorded interview, he described visiting a secured facility at Muroc Airfield, where he was shown objects unlike anything built by human industry at that time. He stated that one of the supervising officers referred to them as Meridian prototypes. When Cantor asked whether they were of German origin, the officer allegedly replied, "They were ours once we signed for them." Cantor died in 1986, and his personal papers, donated to Stanford University, were seized by federal agents before public release. Technical. Historians attempting to trace the supposed Meridian hardware note that no serial or patent numbers from those documents appear in post-war aerospace records. The alloys described, primarily beryllium-titanium composites, were decades ahead of contemporary metallurgy. One declassified 1958 memo from General Electric's Advanced Research Division makes a single reference to magnetically assisted thrust systems derived from captured foreign research. The memo's author, project manager Donald Kerr, later became a CIA director. All project titles were redacted except one word: Meridian. In 2001, during an inventory of long-classified US Air Force archives at Maxwell AFB, archivists uncovered a reference card labeled Black Meridian, see also Station Green. The same Station Green was previously mentioned in the decoded fragments of the Vienna cipher's directive Nullpunkt, implying that the transfer of SS research continued seamlessly into NATO's early intelligence apparatus. Yet no living official has acknowledged such a link. When researchers filed a request to view the file, they were informed that it no longer exists in this collection. The entry was removed from the index 1 month later. Today, Black Meridian endures as both legend and administrative ghost. No physical documents remain, yet its fingerprints appear across a half-century of classified programs. The Vienna cipher's hidden directive, the Odessa intercept's Meridian phrase, and the Arctic silence of Polar Station 9. Each fragment points toward a continuous chain of technological inheritance, an invisible hand guiding science beneath the banner of secrecy. What began in the dying months of the Third Reich evolved into a new architecture of control, buried under defense budgets and compartmentalized projects. Historians will never find the crates from Allah, nor the missing blueprints from Wright Field. The engineers who saw them are gone, their testimony scattered or silenced, but somewhere behind the layers of redacted ink and missing pages, the term Black Meridian persists, appearing, disappearing, then reappearing again across eras like a coded whisper reminding us that not all wars end when the guns fall silent. Some simply change frequency. The record ends, but the silence does not. Across archives sealed and files erased, each thread, Solstice, Nullpunkt, Polar Station, Odessa, Meridian, forms a web of continuity that never acknowledged defeat. The lines between vanishing convoys, untraceable scientists, and classified technologies blur until they become indistinguishable from the infrastructure of the modern world. What was once the machinery of war became the machinery of secrecy, and beneath the polite veneer of declassification and national security, the same questions linger, unanswered. Where did the convoy's cargo go? Who authorized Directive Nullpunkt? Why did Meridian vanish just as the Cold War began? The past is not gone. It is simply redacted, waiting for someone to read between the black lines.